Good morning, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. You know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten you. I want to inspire you. I want to empower you. I want you to be your best self. Now, Scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today, I want you to be fired up about a book entitled Darkness Before the Dawn. Its author is Charles Gates Jr., and I am about to tell you to get ready. You know what I'm going to say? Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Good morning, Charles. Thank you so much for joining me on Daily Spark today.
Good morning, Dr. Angela. Thanks for having me on the show. It's an honor to be here.
No problem. Now, I love it because you have a book of poetry, and I do love a good book of poetry. Now, before we get started, though, I always ask my guests kind of the same questions, and that is in the beginning, because I want people to feel like, you know, we're sitting down and having coffee together. So that question is, what makes Charles Charles? What makes you you?
Well, what makes me is that I've been put in situations where my back was against the wall and had no choice but to overcome and to climb that wall over the obstacles that were placed before me, because it's either that or admit defeat, and I wasn't about to let the things happening to me overcome me, but they were actually used to catapult me toward a journey that I never expected.
You know, I love that you say that, because so many times I think that people allow their circumstances or situations to actually pull them down instead of using that energy to catapult them forward, to help them stay focused, to achieve whatever it is that they're trying to do. Did you find that you are a self-motivated person? Like, are you able to keep yourself going forward? Do you like encouragement for others? How did you keep the momentum to move forward?
Well, I gotta say it's a little bit of both. I found through poetry, I found a motivation to answer like the questions I laid out before me, and what everything happening to me means. But if it wasn't for the inspiration and the shove from my closest friends and family, I would have never done anything with it, and I would have probably been crushed, been defeated, because the mind is like plagues you when you're alone and stuff. So I couldn't have done it without God's guidance and the counsel of some great friends and family.
And you know, there is nothing like having a really great support team. You said that, and thank God for our faith, because I tell you, it really will keep us going through. Now, being an author, is that something that you always wanted to do, or did you find that it was just the next logical step for you?
Actually, when I wrote my first book, I wasn't writing a book. When I wrote it, I was just writing down what I felt, because it felt like it was destroying me. And if I didn't find that outlet, if I didn't have that thing that I could plug into, it would destroy me. And poetry became that spark, as you said, and that really ignited in me a fire, a passion to overcome, and to if it weren't for the wise counsel of friends that so delighted in my poetry, I would have never published it in a book. And when they suggested it to me, I told them no. I said, that's foolish. That's a foolish errand. Why would I want to be that vulnerable in front of strangers? And yeah, really had to overcome that fear.
That is so true. That many people don't think about the fact that so many authors are they're putting themselves out there because they're sharing their thoughts, and especially when it comes to poetry. It's one thing with a book of fiction because you understand that it's a made up story, to entertain. But so many times with poetry, it is heartfelt. It's an expression of the person who's writing. So that is true. You do have that bit of vulnerability there. I love that. Now, your title, Darkness Before the Dawn. Did you find that the title came to you first? Did it come out of your writings as you were kind of putting your thoughts down? How did you come up with that title?
Well, that kind of title kind of just came out of I did write a poem that has the same name that's in the last chapter of my book. And that influenced it, but that the title itself also stems from the quote on the front cover. Even when the sun sets and I'm left to face my darkest hour, even my shadow leaves my side. So the setting is the sun is setting, and I feel like everything around me has just dissipated, and I have nothing left. Not even my shadow, who was by me all the day long, was there when my darkness set in. So, yeah,
I like that.
So it's really fitting for the book.
Now that is an awesome answer, and I think that there's somebody right now who's nodding their head saying, "Yep, I can relate to that. I can definitely relate. I love it." Now you kind of talked about that there were some personal things that you had to go through. How did your personal struggles affect your poetry? How did you choose what you wanted to share and what you wouldn't share?
Well, everything that I felt was just pouring out of me. There were days when I would just write for 8 to 10, 12 hours in the summer and really just pour myself out. And everything around me became a metaphor for poetry. My life was poetry. And it was so natural that because it's a part of me that I had to put it down on paper because I had to evaluate what was truly happening on the inside of me.
I love that. Now, I tend to ask questions that are, always flip side of the coin, but this time I need a three-sided coin. So this question applies to physically, mentally, and spiritually. But if you will, let's kind of break it down into three separate questions. And the question is, where were you physically when you were writing? Did you need to be separated from others? Are you kind of that person who likes to go off, or can you write in the middle of the living room? The next part, mentally, how did it affect you emotionally when you were writing? And last part, spiritually, did you find it to be a spiritual expression while you were writing? Let's start with physically. How did you decide where you were going to be, the environment that you needed physically to write?
Well, during that year, the year I wrote the book, back in 2011, I was. You gotta look at the physical aspect of it, where I was homeless at the time I wrote the book. I wrote most of the book in 6 months while I was homeless, living between a tent and a shed. So I was isolated. I felt like nobody else out there understood what I was going through, and my isolation eventually built walls that made it hard for me to open up. And the only way for me to open up was through writing, through poetry, because it understood me, it listened to me, it empowered me to be something, to influence others, and to challenge myself to grow as a person.
Now, that totally and completely I can understand how not only just your situation of being homeless, but just the fact that you were separated, even if you didn't want to be separated, because of that situation. What a remarkable story. Now, how did when it comes to your spirituality with it all, did you find that because you were in a state of homelessness at that particular moment, did it affect your faith in any way? Did it affect how you were dealing with God?
Oh, most definitely. Spiritually, I was dead at the time I wrote the book.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was in the shed, it was an empty room on it's like the second floor of a shed that the neighborhood kids would party at. My friends would party in that room, and that's where I was living during the second half of being homeless. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know at the time, but God was speaking to me in that room. Like, he was with me in the furnace. He was with me in that room speaking to me, and it really comes out in my poetry. And I talk a lot about good and evil, about following which path, the path of darkness or the path of light. Like every road, there's two roads set before you, and it's up to you to choose which one you will walk down. And my poetry ultimately helps lead me to Jesus, to put my faith in him, to wash away my sins, and to really renew my mind. And I believe that brings us to our third question.
Absolutely. Mentally, how did you have the fortitude to keep going?
Well, as I said, obstacles, instead of backing down from them, I look for ways to overcome them. At the time I was writing the book, my mind was being messed with by my then ex. I was involved in like a cult, so God was breaking me out of that. It took almost 2 years to do that. So I had all these people feeding me ideas and ideologies in my mind, and during the year I wrote the book, when God was speaking to me in that room, he was actually planting doubts of in my head about what they were doing, whether or not that was for my benefit or their own. So he used my poetry to break those chains, that mindset that I had to be accepted by them. No, I'm already accepted by God. And he chose me to be an influence and a voice for those who are going through similar things that I've gone through. Yeah.
And I'm so glad that you shared that, because so many times I think people think that God only uses perfect people, but we understand that there are no perfect people, and God has a tendency to use people more so that are real, like they've been through stuff, and they're able to relate to people because people go through stuff. So thank you so much for reminding us of that. Now, we have about a minute left in this particular part of the show, but I want to ask you, how did you feel when you finally held your published book in your hands?
I was thrilled. I was so proud of myself, and not only myself, but it was the first time at 21 years old, it was the first time in my life I've ever heard anyone tell me, I am proud of you. That was the first moment that I really felt like I did something that was worthy of praise. And I knew then that I made the right decision, that I can really influence a crowd that is broken like me, that is going through things like me, that has gone through the darkness. And I can, through my story, show them how to get out of that, how to overcome, and how to apply your pain to the furnace of a passion, to turn the negative into a positive.
I love it. I love it. Well, Charles, it is time for us to go to break. But before we do, can you remind everyone, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And how do we stay in contact with you?
The title of the book is Darkness Before the Dawn. by Charles Gates Jr., and you may actually purchase it. I made it available on my website because I want my fans to be able to easily access my life, and I want to be able to really show them my journey. And the link to my website is charlesgatesjr.com/books. That will take you to...
Now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this.